All right, welcome to this is the 10th episode of ThisIsBS, the third in our ISO series. Today I have a fantastic character who's a little bit different from our usual group of characters that we have, more akin to our first one, and Mr. Graham Hawkins. I would like to welcome to the show the one and only Stuart Little. Stuart, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. In fact, the sun is shining. It's been raining like hell for the last few days, which has been great because we needed the water. But it's a beautiful day here in New Zealand. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I say that you're my first New Zealand-based guest, which is phenomenal. And me being from Wellington, and obviously people can pick up on my Irish accent. We have one Kiwi who's not in the country and one Englishman who's now in the country. So it's great to have that
Yeah.
like that. So,
Well,
Stu, before we get into everything, would like to know a bit more about you. So, why don't you run through what you're doing currently with Agency 8 and also your background, and give the viewers an understanding as to what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So, well, hello everybody. I'm Stuart Little. I've Agency 8 is my business. It's a relatively new business, and it's been born out of a kind of a deep passion I have for kind of delivering things in a digital manner, but also using social media as kind of a mechanism for that. So just a bit of history, I guess. I've come from the sales background, predominantly in corporate world for the past 12 years or so here in New Zealand, and in the IT industry prior to that in the UK. But I've kind of taken this opportunity of, in last 6 months or so to start Agency 8 and be there for businesses who are looking to actually embrace how digital can make a massive difference for them. Certainly been my focus.
Excellent. That's good to hear. So with all the world going around and stuff, we've seen lots of people kind of moving in different elements. Can you describe to me, for those of you who are going to take a look at Stu's background on LinkedIn after this, can you describe what exactly a LinkedIn specialist does for those who are not aware of what your role is in that sense?
I guess I've been using the platform to get success, really, and using it in a strategic way. I think that is for so long has been a place where people have felt that that's where they have their online CV, and that's been the foundation of it. But it's, as most people know, and those that are using it, it's now a platform of close to 700 million people. It's got lots and lots of new functionality since it was brought out by Microsoft. It's been a platform which they've invested heavily in. So I've taken that on board. I think if I go back kind of 4 years, I had a moment where I really wanted to engage differently with my customers. I wanted to use a way of working that was easily accessible for them, that was able to really translate a message real quick, and more importantly, give a bit more substance to how I was showing up for them, and more importantly, how I was sharing information with them. So I wanted to be somebody that was relevant to the digital kind of move that buyers were showing. They wanted a different way of working, rather than simply showing up and kind of trying to present and be there, like doing demos and kind of the standard way that people were working at that point in time. So I embraced that technology then, and fortunately, as it's moved on, I've been able to kind of really get a deeper understanding of that, and then subsequently closing bigger deals as time's gone on. So my time with last 4 years with Spark have been pretty successful in that respect, and meeting your targets has been an easier process because you've had that part of your kit bag full. You've had actually stuff you can draw upon. So I enjoy that. I mean, obviously there's still a face-to-face discussion that has to happen with customers. I'm not here advocating that you go online and you update your LinkedIn profile and all of a sudden money comes flooding in. There's more of a science to it than that, but it's a case of really understanding the value of the connections, understanding the value of diversity in respect of a much wider network of people that you can actually have access to, and then being part of the communities which are formed there. Once you start doing that, then you start seeing some real interesting pull towards you as an individual, and more importantly, as the business you represent. You can start to talk more knowledgeably about the products that you sell and how they solve problems for people. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a really good breakdown, which I like. So with that in mind, I've got one other question that fascinated me after looking, going through your profile and talking with you, preferably as well, and going through what suits you. Could you run through what the Clifton Strengths methodology is? I'm curious about that, and I'm sure lots of my network would be interested to know about that.
Sure.
Read up on it. It's quite fascinating.
Okay, so yeah, this is really this was a bit, again, a big moment for me. Whilst I've been in sales for a while, and I guess what I wanted was, I've been successful. I'd had a great year. If I go back to 2016, where I kind of is my entry point on this, I look at it and I go, I've had a great year. What can I do that's better? How can I be a better version of me? How can I change and understand myself? How can I get a level of self-awareness that I perhaps may have been missing or wasn't aware of? So my sister, who's actually was the guide on this, and what she was able to put me towards was the Gallup Strengths, it's known as Clifton Strengths as well, and basically what that is a profiling tool that you go through, and then it gives you a score. Basically, it gives you a top 5 in the initial assessment, and then you kind of get the strengths are played out, 34 strengths across 4 domains. So what you're able to see is, what strengths really resonate and come to rise to the surface for you. So in my case, I was, I'm a strategic thinker. I have this thing called input, which is about, love of information and gathering lots of data to be able to be of use of people. I have individualization, which means that I make it wholly relevant to those people in respect of really really understanding what the individual wants. And I think that I've kind of known this about myself in respect of how I work with people, but it's great to have it kind of put into a language which was really clear. And then I have what's called activator, which allows me to really take action about what I want to go and do. And then I have arranger, which means I bring together the right teams, which formulate a pretty potent mix. Once you've got that clear in your head, you're able to then move with purpose about what you want to go and do. And I think being able to speak confidently about that is really empowering. So I then took it upon myself to kind of talk about that and share it in the social feeds that I created through the business I was part of. And then that took hold. So I was able to then work with other people and show them the tool, and then help them through the kind of analysis of that, because that was something I was really enjoying in respect of my gathering of information and understanding, but also seeing people grow as a result of that. So people really took it on board. So it's been a real game changer for me personally. And like I say, I've probably worked with 50 plus people to date, maybe more, I don't know, but it's, that's where I see the value is when you imprint on people and they're able to see something that wasn't in themselves. And then all of a sudden they go, wow, actually I can now go do the thing I really want to go and do, which is kind of where I live.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to me, learning when you have this subconscious ideal of what you bring to the table, and then it's reiterated or emphasized in some form of structured content. I find that interesting, fascinating. I tested in the 99th percentile for woeful chat. That's how I sit. So strengths and weaknesses, which is why I do this. So with that in mind, we have a lot of people that we're watching this will kind of have a similar ideal of Stu's background with Graham Hawkins, who I mentioned earlier, with the same
for sure.
How he's doing. What I would like to quickly, before we do get into the BS side of things, is get your take on the nature of traditional outreach for the new steps. You mentioned the LinkedIn side of things.
Yeah.
What we're curious on is what do you see as the biggest difference right now between the traditional outreach element comparative to the new style that we're seeing with not necessarily COVID, but like the nature of the digital revolution?
Yeah, I think that it comes to, evolution of businesses is one thing, how they've got to actually interact with their customer is the most important thing. You've got to look at how your customer behaves, and then you behave accordingly. If your customer is looking for digital engagement, which most are because we all carry mobile phones and have digital devices and we're engaged in that way, if that's where your ideal clients are, then you kind of have to be in that space and doing that job accordingly and doing a good job of that. I think their expectations have changed as well. Even those that have been in the business a long time are having to really adapt to how this digital component is showing up. So therefore, if you're not embracing that, you're missing out, because what's happening is if you're still trying to, and look, there's space for cold calling, right? There's space for that. There's space for email. There's space for all of these things, but ultimately they're not the boom side of what's happening. These aren't the growth side, in my humble opinion. I see that actually the digital is where the favored engagement is. And I think if COVID scenarios taught us anything, is that, it's shown the cracks and the holes in digital transformation journeys for a lot of businesses. But what it's also shown is that sales can be done in a different way. This kind of conversation is very familiar to everybody now who's in a business and understands that either they're taking care of their people, they're taking care of their customers via these type of channels, because that's what's been enforced on everybody, right? So we're learning to live with that. And I think that it's been the ultimate proof of concept. That's how I've worded it. It's been this moment where we've all had to kind of think differently, and that's interesting because I kind of feel like I live in that space of thinking differently a bit. So, to be honest, and it's kind of a weird thing to say, but the COVID thing's probably been a blessing for some people, because it's just, I look at it and go, wow, my message is now much easier to translate because people have got a reality of what this is all about. Previously, it was challenging to do that because, people were constantly in a cycle of understanding that their day-to-day was what was important for them. And, I'll get to my LinkedIn, or I'll get to my digital, or I don't really like doing Zoom because I don't want to be on camera. Whereas now, kind of like there's a reality of being on camera, and the resources that are available there. I mean, without things like Zoom or Teams or whatever your flavor is, I've been using StreamYard and things like that, for example. But when you've used those, you kind of find out how easy they are, how engaging they are, and what you can actually do with them that makes a little bit of different to your business. It makes your business feel different, So yeah. I'd be lost without it. So I don't know. I don't know how others work.
That's why I would find that fascinating, in the sense that this current pandemic has pushed a lot of businesses to move forward their digital element. And you get a lot of companies who have been, I wouldn't say necessarily the cold calling and the email and sort of things, but being hesitant looking at a digital investment because it looks like it's something that's a bit, well, so the same thing with like the .com boom or the introduction of social channels and social media. What changes in these realms happen is that businesses will take a little bit longer to get involved. And the ones that do get in early tend to succeed in it, and in that sense. And I find that the most fascinating part when you talk about traditional outreach being new. I work in video, so obviously I use video a lot, but at the same time you get people who are forced into these new outreach patterns, and in turn it then changes their mindset on how that works. So you talk about it being a positive for some companies. You look at the Amazons of the world who are making a stupid amount of money. But there's a lot of people now who are adding new skills to their quivers to their bow, as they say, because they're forced into this bucket. So I totally understand. I think everything you've said will resonate with a lot of people now. Whereas like a year ago, maybe people were like, oh, maybe not. Now it's like, okay, now we see the vision. We're forced into it. It's
look, let's just say it's a liberating space to be in too. Like it does change that. Once you get the confidence to be okay in this space, then all of a sudden you can realize that you have a quicker way of getting to your customers and a different way of engaging. That doesn't mean you have to travel to the other side of the city to do that meeting. It doesn't mean you have to be back to backs and then work after hours. Like there's different ways of working it so that you can become way more productive in this space. And then if you do one cut of something that's really interesting, you share it to multiple people. I mean, look, there's nothing like this digital for that, and you can have the same meeting with a dozen people, but it doesn't mean you're going to get the same outcome. But the fact is that the video is trackable and traceable, right? You can see what's going on in that space. Sure. And those analytics are really what helps drive meaningful discussion. And that's the challenge.
It's the one-to-many forum comparative to the one-to-one. It's the same conceptual idea that when we talk about LinkedIn as a platform, and you compare that to an email blast out to 100 people, you may track each individual one, but the nature of LinkedIn allows you for that, or like social channels, to expand on that without having to do any more extra work, which I find fascinating. So to take that all into mind, I think everything you've discussed already would be enough for us to sit on that as our video, but we've got a few more things to touch on. So I'm going to move to the first BS that you've got. For those who haven't seen this before, we bring up 3 BS points from our lovely guest, and that we also talk about how we go about improving those particular points. So let's go on to the first one, Stu. What do we got as our first BS today?
Yep. So look, I've been helping a lot of people with their profiles, because that's a passion of mine, and I feel I can add huge value in respect of how people are showing up, because if they're missing elements in that profile, I can quickly fill that and make them look more appealing and give them confidence in areas where they're not perhaps seeing it. But the fact is, what I'm also seeing, unfortunately, as a result of the activity right now, is that companies are not exiting people out of their businesses perhaps how they could. And I say that in a case of self-preservation, because if businesses are simply dumping people, and I say that in its literal sense, because I've actually spoken to people who've been text messaged to say, there's no longer a role with you, and there's really little or no follow-up with that. And there are other examples where people are taken through a process and they're correctly exited out. But I think that moment of like if you've been in a business for a period of time, then there should be this moment where you're respected for the work you've done, and then taken out of the business in a way that allows you to be best prepared for the next step that you want to take. It really shouldn't be, kind of this moment where you feel that you're losing. Like this situation is inevitable for a lot of businesses, and they're going to do that. But I think the best way of them showing who they are and really, if they've got any values and they live to the values that they talk to to gain customers and to retain customers, then it should be the same for their people. And maybe investing in a how do we do things differently for this, to make sure they leave the business in a clear, concise way. What I like to look at it as is they high five people on the way out, right? So they love the experience of leaving so much that they'll go and talk about it which in real terms boost the business that they've come from. Because if what you do is the alternative and you just kick people to the curb, what you get is this terrible brand backlash as a result, because that person will go and talk to way more people about their bad experience, and more likely, it's just not going to be a good outcome for anybody. So I think you've got to be mindful of that.
I'm curious on that one, because there's a couple of points that I think raises from this, and this is actually, if you look back at the Rebecca Powell conversation I had a few weeks back, which talked about the nature of people being bad and ISO and stuff like that. What I would be curious on, you talk about the point of people text messaging and stuff like this.
Yeah.
The motivation behind it is my curiosity. Do you think it's down to a sense of expediting this process because they've got a lot more people to let go? Is it the case that it's just laziness and then it's like, this is the easiest way to do it? Or do you think it's down to a fear of talking to these people and telling them why they're letting them go, like that face to face? What do you think it is?
And look, it could be a combination. There may be elements of that, and I think it depends on the personal scenario for the business, of how the business is actually tracking in this, and how nobody was genuinely prepared for this. No one really saw it coming, but it's like a case of how the business has worked as a result. And I know that like for the owners and for the leadership teams, this has not been an easy ride either. I'm not suggesting that these guys are going, wow, this is a great opportunity for us, let's now drain the swamp of all the people that we don't need, let's get rid of it. But it's, what I'm saying is, I think that the opportunity is the opportunity, right? Like irrespective of the situation that you find yourself in, it's kind of like, how would you like to be treated as a human? Now, if your business is shutting down, that's a real moment for the people responsible for that, and who are managing that situation. But that doesn't mean that they've got to be, really poor in the way that they execute with the people that have been loyal to that business to build it when it was successful. Like that's the piece I guess I got to get my head around, and that's why I'd like to see a bit more of that. People just actually saying, no, look, we've got to take time for this because it's really important. Because what happens is it's the knock-on of how it affects the people. Because like I say, I've spoken to a number of individuals over recent times, and again, my wife who's a photographer, and she's doing similar stuff in helping people kind of get stood back up. But what we're noticing is that those that haven't taken the time, it leaves us such a bad impression long term, and like it can burn the business that they're left with, quite frankly. And that may be the final moment for them. And I know that sounds really harsh and perhaps a little bit melodramatic, I don't know, but even so, I'm seeing it, and I'm calling it out as BS, man. I'm just saying that's really hit me hard, because I feel it's not hard to put together a plan that says, this is how we really want to help you. Like, you've been awesome. We'd like to be awesome back.
I think that to me is another part that I find interesting. You talk about the two sides of the story. There's obviously the people in the leadership team that didn't see this coming, or this being a process and step. What I find interesting though, out of all this, is the element of businesses not having an exit strategy in general. So every business that I've worked for has had some form of, whether it be me leaving or, situations that could occur, having that conversation and going, okay, what worked, what didn't, what can we do better in the future? How can we help you moving forward?
Yeah.
Fascinating element of this current situation that we're in, where people are going, well, this is unprecedented time. We don't have time to kind of talk to everyone about it. Let's just bang it out. So what we'd like to lead to the question here was, what for someone who is exiting a business now, someone who has been given that step, if you are a person who's been given, shown the door, what's the best thing they can do immediately afterwards, or sort of the first few steps that they can do in order to improve this process?
To improve the process, well, maybe what they can do is, if there's an opportunity to speak to the others, if it's affecting a group of people, like a department, or there's an opportunity for those guys to get together and actually have a conversation about how they can best suit themselves. Like they can maybe take a proactive step in that respect. If it's and then maybe they could go back to the business and say, how are you going to handle me leaving? Is it just going to be? I mean, those who've unfortunately been done by text message. I mean, I can't think of anything more brutal than that. But it's those are few and far between, I'd wager. But if you've got the opportunity to speak to the employer and say, look, get this. Is there something that we can do so that if someone's got if someone's proactive in their approach, maybe they should share that with their team. That would be pretty cool. But someone taking those steps. But again, I think it's on the business to say, we want to protect our brand. If we're going to continue trading, if they're shutting down the organization, well, that's a different matter, I guess. But even so, it can be handled correctly. I mean,
it's all about
just a human thing.
It's all about the element of brand recognition in the market.
For sure.
With recruiters, not necessarily recruiters, but like anyone who's going to be recruited into a business. If I hear that a business is handling this sort of way in a certain way, I'm more likely to go, doesn't seem like it'll work for me. Yeah. So I think that is a fascinating point. With that all in mind, so we'll move away from the individual now to the company. So the point I want to raise here is, what can companies do to now improve this? Like, what would be the way in which they can improve this moving forward?
Well, in the same way they've planned, they've obviously taken a clear view of what the business is doing, where it's at, how it's performing, and who it the reality is, with the resources in an organization that are performing a function, if those functions are no longer required, then the steps been taken to get those people on a list. And then as that list is put together, then it should be a process of saying, hey, how do we best suit these people? Typically they're picking people who are resilient, people who are able to deal with this and are able, if they're dealt with in the right way. And I think that's wholly appropriate and perhaps is, where the strength is, because if you can do that for your people, then it just shows that, it's interesting with the value, how that aligns to the values, because if that's written in the values, they should be doing that as a standard. I mean, that's kind of like, look to your values and how we treat people. You can't say one thing and act in another way, because that's just disrespectful to what you stand for as an organization.
There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than seeing organizations that go, we care about our customers. We don't care about our people. And as someone who has been dumped via text message, I can tell you it's bloody brutal. Fun. So, Cassie, if you're at the call, that's great. What I'd say is the best thing to do. So what you're suggesting is basically looking at your structure and how you're building this, and going actually looking at a more humane, more honest approach of going, look, let's have a conversation rather than going to one-way communication. Right? That's sort of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, for sure. And it's part of the plan. I mean, it's kind of the exit strategy that you talked about should be absolutely, as before you get to the point of actually putting people in that situation, that should be on the page prior to any names, in my humble opinion.
I totally agree. I think the element of there's efficiency, then there's being an asshole. Simple as that.
Do you know what? The thing about it is that also what businesses probably fail to mention is, as sad a situation as that is, the trading reality of an organization remaining viable and then building back up. The thing is, if you can use it as a point of conversation and as something that you did that was right for people, and that's what brings up people. That would be probably enable the likely success of the future of the business, right? So that's the point I'm making. I
think it's clear. I think it's just more moving away from, to combine Rebecca's point with yours in the sense of like being in COVID, but also having a humane element. The companies that will succeed from this process will be the ones that have taken the right steps and measures to do the right things. People who are honest about where their situation is. I think that to me is the biggest one. So I totally agree. I think your BS number one is I would hate to get a text message telling me, sorry mate, we haven't got anything for you. Even if it is a global business that's got too many people to contact, have some humanity, talk to people out. So that's BS number 1, and we've already hit some emotional strengths there. I was, being dumped by text. We're going to move on to BS number 2 now. All right, so BS number 1, I totally agree with the exiting element. We're going to move on to number 2. So Stu, what have you got for your BS number 2?
Well, this might be a big one. It might be contentious, but digital in recruitment, and the actual practical application of modern techniques, and that is to say the utilization of video, photography, media-based kind of platforms that actually a person can feel that they can talk to themselves about. Like it's almost like setting yourself up for that interview process and working through that. I think that at the moment, the examples I've been through are, we want a CV. I can't send people a link that gives them a digital version of my, shall I say, my CV. Let's just put it in that terminology. But I can't seem to give that, and that's not what they want. There's kind of like this moment of, well, that's great, but and it's amazing. Most people go, oh, that's insane, that's great, that's fantastic, but we can't use that in our systems. And I think, wow, where has this got to? That I know they deal with a lot of people, but ultimately there's also other ways you can work. There's a lot of smart AI that's available now. So where are people innovating there?
I think that's an interesting tidbit regarding the digital and recruitment. So for those who've seen this show before, they'll know that I've interviewed a whole host of people in this industry that knows that there's something. I think talent acquisition, recruitment all have this one key part to it when it comes to technology. I still, as someone who works in video, know that TA and recruitment is still one of the industries that is quite far behind in terms of technological AI advancement. Yes, there's all these sort of things where you can filter out people based on particular skill sets and particular things. But one thing that tipped my hat when it came to this in terms of the presence of digital is the ones that are utilizing, content delivery strategies when it comes to their recruitment side of things and that thing. Yes, I may be a bit biased, but they tend to have a bit more of flexibility when it comes to their technology structure and stuff. So what I'd be curious to get a point of yours is that I find that the technology is hindered by ATSs more than anything else. Those applicant tracking systems more than anything, because that's where you work in your talent acquisition and stuff like that. And so I've seen a couple of companies that have moved towards utilizing more visual media, digital media in those sort of spaces, but they still require the old standard setup. What I'd be curious to ask you on this one is, what sort of digital media have you seen work in this space? Have you seen anything that's really popped out to you that, when they say they can't use it, is there anything that actually has been like, okay, we can use this is effective?
Well, look, so I've used an application that sits within the Office 365 platform. It's called Sway. And that is about as good a piece of software as I think you could use for free as part of a suite. It's very, to be honest, not many people use it within the Microsoft environment. They probably don't know it's there in most cases. It's not talked about in the same way as PowerPoint or Word or Excel, for example. But it's there nonetheless, and it's extremely powerful in what it delivers. And if anything, it should be the future of where Microsoft technology is going, because it allows you to do all sorts of cool stuff. So if I use that, for example, as my basis for this conversation, and say that if I built a highly engaging, video-rich, photographs in respect of activities and events I've been at, or things that substantiate my activity in work environments, or feedback from customers and that type of stuff. That's not only written, but also, maybe video that talks to that, maybe examples, etc. Whatever, that's what I've tried to use as a means of really looking at who I am and what I do. And just back with that's great, but can you just do a Word version of that for us so that we can then, we can do what we need to do with our systems? Now, if that's the scenario, fine, but then be clear about what it is that you want out of a CV. Because if it's just like you want a list of keywords, then I'll give you a document with a list of keywords on it that sum me up, and then I'll let's attach that to to the feature-rich document that people can then look at. I mean, to be honest, you can get a much better impression of working with somebody in this kind of format than you would do if you're simply reading it off a page, because then you've got to then whittle it down, and there's a group of people that fit the bill, and then that's a smaller group, then there's 4 that get the interview, and then away you go. So and I'm much respect to the recruitment industry. I may be massively paraphrasing how this works, and I might be shot down in flames for that, but in the same vein, it's kind of been my experience. So, I'm only talking to what I know, but it's, I think if that could change and embraced, and I know that there's some, there are some good stuff happening in Australia around this. I know that there's some specific recruitment agencies, Finders Keepers, I think is the name of the company. And they're doing some good stuff in that digital space as well. So it's starting to get there, I think. But like I say, when we look back at this time we've had in isolation and how that's shown us all what technology can actually bring in benefits and what it can do to get stuff done quicker, and the amount of people I've spoken to who've been way more productive in this time in the work that they've been doing has been quite phenomenal in the feedback, not more than I expected, if I'm honest. But it's when I see that, I go, well, there's a space for this now. This isn't going away. So if anything, it's going to get more relevant.
Yeah. So I'm on the side of the same with you as well. I'm talking about utilizing a more digitally driven function, especially within the recruitment and talent acquisition. And being someone who has a platform that recruiters and talent acquisition use to create multimedia, I'm slightly biased. But in the sense that I want to point out something, and just playing devil's advocate around this particular point. What we've had discussions with around sort of the visual media is the element of the initial bias, and I think this is an interesting conversation that can go as deep as it can. But I find this being a curious question. Do you think there'll be some sort of visual or physical bias based on seeing those multimedia-rich platforms? Because name on a CV, you could have John Smith, or the same sort of stuff, but then you see that one is 60, one's 20, one's Australian, one's a Kiwi, one's South African. You might get that initial element of bias. Do you think that would be a problem moving forward if we were to embrace this visual media more?
Maybe, but I think if you're going to make distinctions based upon age, gender, diversity, then those are going to exist whatever you do. It doesn't matter. I mean, ultimately, as soon as that person shows up in person, then it's going to be on or it's going to be off. So I don't think you're ever going to get away from that, quite frankly. And I think that, my view of the world is that, I come at this with I've got some mileage on the clock, but in the end of the day, I look at it and go, well, I'm no stranger to using this type of technology, and I actually embrace it and love it. This is a preferred medium for me. So that may be a preferred medium. It doesn't mean that my age has anything to do with that. Am I able to have a coherent conversation that can get the job done that I'm being employed to do? And that's the question. If we're starting to gender bias or age bias or whatever, then that's a whole different story, there's a further BS in that, by the way, which we could talk forever about. But I think that, quite frankly, that is a different can of worms, man. You got my mind kicking over. But
the reason why I ask is because the reason why multimedia and other industries has worked so quickly is because it's the element of not judging the human based on the human. It's been like the skill set stuff like that, which I find interesting in that tidbit. So that's why I asked the question, because in my role and what I do and the people I coach and train, you get some people who are like, well, it might create a bias. Well, actually, you're just taking one step before that, because you're going to meet the person in person, and now everything's done digitally on camera and stuff, because you're going to see inside their house, you're going to see who they are, stuff like that. So that's why I want to play the devil's advocate on that particular point, just because having seen the people kind of ask that, and I just have the exact same thing. I go, everyone is human in the way and shape and form. If you're going to get into that sort of bias element, that's on you. That's your judgmental process. It's not the nature of the businesses or the people. That's on you. And so, you could be anything from, a one-legged pirate to a, talking Kiwi, I don't know. But the point is that if they can get the job done and they can manage the process properly and they are a fit for your business, it shouldn't matter where they come from, who they are, what they do, right? So That's a big point.
The point of this though is like, you know, it's the ability to submit it. It doesn't mean you're going to get the job, right? And what I'm not advocating here is that, you know, we were going for high production value video that paints you into a light that you're not that person. You know, this is about being authentic to who you are, and I think in the ability to have a dialogue like this actually showcases that better than perhaps written word. So again, the written word's been fine up until this point. And photographs have been fine up until this point, but all of this is changing, and we're living in 2020. You know, this isn't 2010-ish. You know, like things are moving on at a pace here. So, you know, let's start to think about how you might get the better candidate for the role because you're having a dialogue and you show that person's actually engaging. Believe me, I've been at a lot of interviews in my time in the role I've been at, and I've seen some final case candidates who've been submitted through the process, and those guys not always live up to the way that they've been painted, right? You know, when you get them into that corner, they don't always perform, and that's the thing.
You could be a fantastic upfront candidate until you get the job, and then after that you're like, yeah, you know. And this brings another point down to you know, people telling porkies on their CVs when you get people who like say, I've done this, this, and this, and you're like, maybe no. So like that's always a questionable thing. So let's actually move back to the media element of the presence of digital. What I'd be curious on is, you know, I've seen, I mean, to kind of caveat a little bit, I've seen a lot of companies, ATSs, stuff like that, try to embrace content in their platform. So a good example that you'll get is the likes of Job Adder, who allows to put, you know, video content in their job adverts, and then when you're tracking ATSs, stuff like that, and being in a video, you know, recruitment platform like we are, that's, you know, vital. What I'd be curious to hear from you is, where do you think the next initiative is for these guys? I wouldn't say, you know, how do you fix this problem of the digital element, but what's the next initiative that these businesses can take to start to embrace this multimedia in their recruitment process?
That's a good question. And, you know, like I say, I mean, you know, the platforms have to evolve at a pace to do that, though. You know, they have to be capable. I mean, it will mean that you've got to look through I mean, like I say, maybe there's scope for having some kind of review mechanism that says, is this person, does the skill set meet the requirement of the role, right? So if that person's the right, then you've got 10 people. If you've got to review 10 videos of those people talking or showing how they actually interact or how they work, and, you know, giving, and they can demonstrate. It's then up to you to how creative you are, and how you actually translate your message, because like we're all different people, and the strengths thing highlights that, you know, in respect of how that shows up. You know, you go through the tests or the aptitude tests or whatever else it might be for that you need to do as part of a selection criteria. But ultimately, you know, I think just the ability to be able to have this. I mean, the fact is that carte blanche, it doesn't seem to add anything at this point in time, and that surprises me. It's just like if I'm a candidate showing my best possible self, and I'm able to demonstrate it in a way that fulfills a real wide spectrum, then why wouldn't you want to embrace that? You know, why does it? No, that's great. I'm glad you've done that, but let's go to the written word, which we all know and love, and that's going to paint everybody in the same light. Well, you go, well, am I not a better candidate already by showing that initiative? That's a question I've got. Maybe.
I think that's another part. That's another whole part to it. Is like you're looking at potentially from digital within the recruit space, from the actual recruiters or the TA, rather than say the individuals. Yeah. We have a platform that allows, you know, individual candidates to apply to particular roles with video. That's just something that we've done. But I find it more fascinating when people are more likely. So you get that difference between, like, saying, as a candidate, if I'm willing to put that multimedia out there, am I a stronger candidate, or do I just have more initiative to create something new? If you're looking for that particular person, you're looking more for the initiative than you are for, you know, because there could be 10 people with the same skill set. Yeah. Where's the initiative? Where does the attention to detail? Where does the next step come in? So that's the key.
And, you know, like as competition becomes fiercer, I guess, in respect of roles, you know, not as readily available as they may have been, and, you know, people really have to start to look at what is their unique value to what they do over and above the qualifications they may have, or their experience in that space. Interestingly, I think this is going to take me to my next point, and where I live is in the LinkedIn world, because quite frankly, as the scope for the digital environment, and short of not using any other platforms which are readily available, then LinkedIn's really the key for me.
Well, then look, we've already covered point 1 and point 2. Let's move on now to 3. So let's get straight into it. So your third BS I find fascinating around the LinkedIn element, and I think before you even get to it, there'll be a lot of, I want to preface what you're about to say with one key point, is that anyone who's currently watching this on LinkedIn, you may not have the problem of like understanding the build of it, but there are people who don't understand. So let's move on to your BS number 3. What can we hear from Stu on this one?
Right. So I'm just saying that, I talk to people and they look at LinkedIn and go, how is that viable for me? How is that going to work for me? They understand, some people will understand better than others why they need to be there, what it is that they can gain from it. I think until you've spent quite a bit of time in it, and I think if you've used it practically to engage, go through a process and work, in tandem with other things. Let's be clear about this. This isn't just about updating a profile and money flooding through the door. Let me be clear about that. But let me just say that there's mechanisms that you can use, very, very clear and tried and trusted methods that will get you the outcomes you want. So clear goals, clear objectives, clear understanding of what you want to achieve by being in that space, and understand that just because you set the direction in one area, that doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. LinkedIn isn't a one-time only gig. It's a very, very flexible platform in respect of, is this working for me? Then I can adjust it if it isn't. So, that's cool.
LinkedIn is an ever-evolving ecosystem. I think your point regarding LinkedIn being an option to build your market and kind of build what you're doing, I think that if you aren't already utilizing all facets of LinkedIn with engagement, that then boils down to essentially a lack of understanding on the nature of, looking at the technology bell curve. LinkedIn a few years ago was simply part of the early adopters platform. Now it's very much on the laggard side of things. So what I'd be curious to know when it comes to this, because there are so many ways that you could build your market on LinkedIn, and we'll get to the solution that you've got to. What I'd be curious on is, we spoke off camera regarding Gary Vee and his element of how he builds his platform. What I'd be interested to hear is, LinkedIn has an engagement capability with comments, likes, and shares and stuff like that. Where do you think that plays in to someone's market building capability on a platform? Is it just down to just posting, or can they engage on other people's posts and comments and stuff? Where do you think that sits?
Well, look, absolutely. It's all of that. And I think the value is, so first and foremost, get your profile so that it actually speaks to you, what you add value, how you work with the customer. It's not going to be so much about you. It has to be about what it is you do, how you work, what it is you provide, the services. You be clear that you're there for a reason to gain business, unless you're not there to gain business, in which case you're probably on the wrong platform. Maybe Tinder might be the better place for you. But the thing is that from my perspective, I look at it and go, what is the goal you want to achieve? Now, from a business perspective, there is no equal to this platform, in my humble opinion. And I've used a lot of CRMs, right? CRMs tend to be, really badly maintained. They have poor information and they don't give you the outcomes that you require. They are filled full of poor funnel management and quite frankly, unicorns and rainbows in most cases. When I look at LinkedIn as a platform and I engage in that, I see a changing environment that's actually happening in the customer's real world. And more importantly, I see commentary from those businesses and key stakeholders and people of influence and value to you as in the whatever business you serve, and more importantly, what market you serve. I mean, get your head around the fact that 700 million people close to are working in that space. Not everybody's engaging daily, I will hasten to add, but the reality is it's a big market. So, you can be really, really present there and get great results. So I think that, those that are missing that and not engaging with customers or not speaking, actually, there's so much good commentary coming through. So if you only have to follow relevant hashtags to your space of focus, your specialty, and all of a sudden you're getting content pushed to your feed that is of huge value, and then you can start engaging there. And what happens is the people in their networks see your stuff, and if that's meaningful to them, they'll come through that channel. Now, I had a dialogue with a guy just prior to this who's he met me through there. Most of the people I'm meeting, obviously, it's kind of just a naturally occurring thing. They're coming through that channel for me. But the reality is there are people of substance and people who want to get stuff done and can see my skill set as valuable to them. So in which case, that's great. And that's where my people are. So, like if your customer's there, and people say, well, my customer's not on LinkedIn. I say, yeah, but there's like, what business are you in? What industry are you in? How much do you know about that? Okay, so you know everything that's happening in New Zealand, for example. That's cool. What's happening in the US? What's happening in the UK? What's happening in Europe? Where the whole world is your oyster around that. Then you bring value from all of those areas back to New Zealand and start sharing stuff that people don't know about. And that's what people go, you're sharing some cool stuff that I didn't know about. Let's talk about that. All of a sudden, your stock rises and you're in a position where you can have meaningful discussion.
Yeah, I think that in itself is the ideal scenario for anybody who's looking to maximize their business. Is going, it's not about my customers being, I could be a mechanic but still have information on LinkedIn. That
for sure. Like it's really, really important that, so you talk about attention, right? Attention's what's key in anything. Like that's the whole premise of marketing, is to grab attention from people. Now we've never been in a place where it's more that is richer, like there's attention all the time. You've got to focus everything on all these different devices you're using and whatever. So the point here is like, how do you grab attention when you go to the places where all your competition aren't necessarily, where you can actually have a voice which people will listen to. Now, if you're like, this is a classic, right? So in the lockdown period, hairdressers were not doing hairdressing, right? Some very shrewd hairdressers were selling back to their customers and saying, we value you, so we're going to share ideas, knowledge, understanding. We're going to introduce you to all of our teams so you know who everybody is. So yeah, they may have a relationship with their hairdresser and maybe the person who works with them on a regular basis. But now they know everybody in the hairdressers as a result, because they've done bios and they've done interviews, or they've done, this is my specialty, this is my specialty. So the next time they go in, if their hairdresser isn't available, they may go to the next person because they know a bit about them, they know they've got their back, and they'll get the same outcome. Now that's just one niche, right? If you're a mechanic, do videos about what cars you service, what your best outcomes are, how you do it, what common problems there are. All of a sudden people are going to go, right, I'm going to go and get my BMW serviced there because that guy knows about his stuff. I'm going to go and get my Land Rover done there because that always falls apart and I need somebody to be there to pick up the pieces literally. Like that's it. So
I find that
that's all happening in that space, man.
That's the part. But this is the whole premise of social content and delivery, right? Is we were so focused, and if you look at sales and delivery and stuff, it was all about that focus on that one person or delivering to that one person. We've got the point now where you have a market that is untapped. Whether you think it's a laggard platform or an early adopter platform, look at the difference. The nature of the audience is one that will be important to you, even if they're not your particular customers, because you're expanding your brand. This is where the education piece comes in. And this is something I advocate for all the time. Yeah. So in my customer relations, the whole thing I focus on is educating my customers on optimizing and utilizing our platform better. Not to say, hey, come to me, come pay me, I'll do all this for you. It's more along the lines of going, hey, let's educate you on the ways in which you can expand your brand doing X, Y, Z. Yeah. So this then leads me to the other part of the whole viability of LinkedIn, is utilizing it in a business development.
Oh yeah.
And I think this is the part where people either fall down completely on their face or they actually maximize it the right way. Yeah. To follow up on Graham's point from last time we spoke about in regards to education, push and pull. So pulling in prospective buyers based on utilizing content and delivery, just you said about the hairdressers and the mechanics, as opposed to push where you're just forcing stuff on them. I'd like to get your take on one of the points that you mentioned regarding the audience and being shrewd with your audience. What would you say if I'm someone who doesn't post content, someone who doesn't utilize LinkedIn heavily? What would be the first few steps I could take in order to start maximizing the company's brand, my steps, stuff like that? I know you talk about, optimizing your own LinkedIn profile, but what other steps can I take to get that up and flowing?
Right. So we've covered a fair bit of ground on this conversation, but look, I'm going to go through it this way. Get your direction clear. about what you want it to do, because in many respects you've got to know that if this is the right solution, if this is the right thing to fix your problem of what, you know, the outcome you want. Because, you know, just throwing social media or a digital strategy at something doesn't mean it's going to fix it. You might have other problems which are just, you know, way bigger that you need to solve first. But once, let's say that that's sorted and you know this is part of what you want to do. So get your direction correct of like, what do you want to achieve out of it? Then craft the appropriate skills and tools around that. So the profile is absolutely critical in respect to that, how that shows up and how that shows up across your team. That's not just simply the one individual. It's got to be consistent in its messaging. Mm-hmm. Also, I would wager that having the leadership of the business buy into this is actually quite critical, because if they don't see a value in it, it's just going to be people, like I say, dancing alone in the field, which is not fun. You know, you want to build a movement. You want people to see you doing it and want to be part of that. So it's got to be led from the top. I think that once you've got that sorted out, then understand kind of how you want to create content. Who you're going to use for that? Is it, you know, you're going to get somebody in to help you create the content, and it's going to be done that way, or is it going to be organic content that every individual plays? Now, you're talking about, you know, I've used this to the point of creating opportunity and seeing things through and doing things digitally to get end results, and customers being way more engaged because they can share information more readily. They can showcase it on their phone. It's sized and managed to the right screen environment, irrespective if it's a 40-inch screen, you know, a small phone, whatever it may be, you know, from iPhone right through, it's covered. So that's what you need, is a scalable content. Once you've got that sorted out, you're away. So LinkedIn allows that. You know, it's got the video, it's got all of the links, and it's got the ability to showcase your stuff, the good work you do. You know, then it's just about talking about your experiences and customers, and being present enough to record what's happening in your organization, because every day there's an opportunity of something happening that's going to be of value to customers to see. Yeah. So, you know, they need to know how you work, who you are, how you show up, what that means. Now, start capturing that, and then people start getting real ties to your organization because they feel the value proposition that you bring to the table, and it's not just a story that you tell them in the moment you're trying to sell them something.
Yeah, I think to preface something you just said in terms of value proposition, whilst you could be out there making all kinds of content, what value do you bring to the viewer? What value do you bring to that audience? And I think this is something I teach to my customer base and to people on LinkedIn, is the element of when you're creating content, you can't do it from your perspective. What are you getting out of it? It's the viewer. What are they seeing? What are they getting? And if you craft your strategy around the very first question is, what does the customer want? From a mechanic, they want their car fixed. They want their car fixed in a timely manner, stuff like that. Hairdresser, they want their hair done. So that to me is the other part, is that lots of people struggle with this, and this is something that
okay. So I'm going to go a little deeper than that, because I think that actually it's far more to it than that. Like, so if you know. These, you know, if you're going to get your hair done, and I can't talk about that, but let's say if you're going to get your hair done, then that's about an image you want to portray, and that's about a moment you want to, you know, you either want, you know, maybe you want I don't know, you want to impress your partner, you want a better love life, I don't know, you want to get a partner, you want, you know, like your whatever it may be, I don't know, but there's an end result that's nothing to do with getting your hair done. That process might be fantastic in respect of what it is as an experience, but the ultimate end result has a different impression on that person. It's not just simply a process you go through because it's like, you know, there's an outcome for that. The same for getting your car fixed. You know, like, what does it mean for you to have a vehicle to get somewhere? You know, like, it's like the story. I love the story of, you know, like, why do people buy the hook? You know, or why do they put a hook in the wall? You know, like, what is it they want from the hook? Well, it's not that. They don't want the hook. They want the picture on the wall. And then it's not about the picture on the wall. It's what that says about them when people come round. And then when people come round, what do they say about them? You know, like, so it's a much bigger story. So actually they want to impress people, or they want people to know they've got a Picasso or whatever else it may be. I don't know. But it's never about the hook. The hook's just a mechanism. And like I say, LinkedIn's a mechanism that I use, but I use to great success with people, because it takes them on a bit of a journey about themselves, self-discovery and self-awareness, but also how they can then do things more strategically to actually get the results they want. So
that's the thing. The point that I think out of all this is taking is that LinkedIn is the catalyst to the success. It's not the success itself. And I think that's the point that bringing up all that sort of thing, because here's the element that's important. You talk about that. I've got a photo of Amy Winehouse back here, and I got that in a Secret Santa in 2017. and I'm keeping it up there because it turns out my mate got it, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is a pretty cool photo. But it also brings the same point of going, well, I had to get hooks for that to put it up, I had to do a bunch of stuff. So that in itself is the interesting point. The final part I'd like to touch on from this, because you're talking about that, is actually moving to the experience you've just kind of touched on a little bit in terms of the experience you build from that. If I'm someone who is going to engage with this content, stuff like that, and talk about the experience I get from that, what are sort of the potential downfalls in terms of these experiences that you might get from the LinkedIn sort of thing? So for example, if I post content and get a bunch of negative responses from people and stuff like that, what do you think are the potential trapdoors in this stitch? What can people avoid in this sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that, people are often hung up on this, and this is the thing that stops people taking action, right? It's actually the same with anything. If, you just don't want to be visible, and, there's an element of being visible in this space, but if you're in a position right now where you're looking for a role, and a lot of the people I work with are currently looking for roles, and that's absolutely, the world is like that. I mean, to be honest, there's people who are in roles looking for roles. So that's just the way of the world. But it's, I think that the process has to be. Sorry, what was I going to go with that? I've completely lost my train of thought.
I have that effect on people.
No, man, it was I completely lost my train of thought. Sorry, just to what was the question there again?
So, what are the potential trapdoors that people might?
Trapdoors, right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
So potential trapdoors. So I think you've got to be, this is where I want to go with this. So you've got to be in a position where you want to put yourself out there. You've got to be confident enough for that, because if, like I say, and I think that's part of the setting of the direction you want to head in. Because once you're clear on that, you've actually then got purpose, and then purpose drives the outcome. So, you know what you're going to be doing. I think if you're going to get hung up about people commenting, sure, there are haters in every walk of life, irrespective of where you go, what you do, and certainly social media probably has its, a disproportionate amount of trolls. LinkedIn isn't so bad for that. I will be honest. There are people who've just got nothing better to do, but that's fine. And I love the trolls. You know what I love to do is that those people are my kind of fuel, because if you're getting people who are being negative about you, you're making an impact somewhere. And I think that that's a great thing. It's just content at the end of the day. You're not going to please everybody all the time. So I look at that, and then I love those people. I go back to them and I smother them with love. And then they go away quite quickly because they're just not used to it. You don't know where that person's coming from, what they're doing. So just treat them with love or block them. It's as simple as that, right? So, there's two ways of doing it. They're not there forever, so don't worry about it. If they're not part of your end game, I mean, if your market is coming back to you and saying, you're a complete waste of time, this is a disaster, I don't like what you stand for, you're in the wrong business. Like that.
It's fascinating to me, because it's like, I think there's that great saying where it's like, it's, if you've pissed people off, that's good. It means you've stood up for something, which I find is a fascinating. I'm not sure if it's Eminem or Kobe Bryant, maybe one of the two.
Yeah.
But I think the point you raised, I post a fair bit of content. I get a couple of one. I have one from a guy in Germany, and I will never forget this, because I made a video asking, what's the main question? What's the first question that you ask someone as a recruiter? What's the first question you ask? And his response was, this is the most asinine video I think I've ever seen in my entire life. What kind of dopey person recruits based on one question? And then I went to answer him with something, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait. And then my head of marketing in my company answered him with a really good response. And he's like, yeah, she's right. Listen to her. She knows what she's doing. I was like, yeah, I work with her. I the same way. So
yeah.
It was fascinating to me. And I think you talk about trolls and stuff like that. I think it's less about trolling on LinkedIn, social media like Instagram, Facebook. We need a system where people need to actually get a social media license, where if they can't formulate a coherent sentence, they're not allowed to
maybe
butchering the word sentence. But to go back to the point of the haters and the trapdoors and stuff like this, I think it's a point of going, if you know your audience, if you know your content, if you know the intent, and if you know what the end game is for this, there's nothing holding you back in that sense. And I think that's the biggest part out of all this, is like, I think you've covered already what you kind of do in that sense. It's like you just got to take the leap and understand that you've got the points of knowing those areas. So I completely and utterly agree, because for someone like me who makes content all the time, I'm posting at least 2 to 3 times a week on LinkedIn and getting that. You're going to get your share of trapdoors because that's how it works. But you learn from these things. No one is going to be perfect all the way through. And a great example of this, which I always love, is the Gary Vee thing I talked about before. The guy did a podcast for 2 years on wine. No one listened. No one did until he became the the generosity guy on LinkedIn and Instagram and stuff like that. So honestly, man, the 3 points you've covered today have all got different annotations for different people. I think that's the fascinating part, is all of them are definitely BS. But out of all of them, I think what you're kind of saying is the element of positivity in these markets and positivity in these processes can lead to so many good things, but it's got to be a positive mindset from your end, from the customer, from the people you work for. So I am totally all for it. I think you've nailed all of these today, which I really appreciate. So with that in mind, I'm going to sort of lead towards the end of this conversation here. And as for those of you who have watched ThisIsBS before, you kind of understand, what we're all about here. We're all about generosity and giving. And so, as you may have seen last week, I had the privilege of offering a lovely gift to Mr. Smith, and he unfortunately was unable to take it at the time because he was in Sydney and rejected it. That's fine. But Stu, since you're in New Zealand, I do have the lovely ability. I've got a package up here for my dad that I've got to send to him in Wellington, so I may as well send you one as well. I've got a lovely photo that I give to people, and I think it's an opportunity for you to kind of put something up in your house. You talk about the hook, you talk about the photo. This is a great chance to remember this great conversation that we've had. So, Stu, what are your thoughts on getting a lovely gift from us here at Video My Job?
Well, so a lovely gift, yeah, but a photo of you. Look, let's just be real about this. I've got 2 teenage kids, and they're in a very impressionable age, and I feel that that will be probably too much for me to have that in my home. No, that's not going to work. No, sorry.
We talked before about being dumped via text. Being dumped via Zoom is something I'm not experienced until right now. And I think I felt emotions before, Stuart, and you've seen in my videos the nature of my delivery. But
you're not thinking it through, man. That's the problem. It's like you're obviously there's a theme here, and you gotta. I don't think you understand your customer. That's the problem. You got to do some work.
You say that, but I think the customer for this photo isn't necessarily the people I interview. It's more the people, who.
Well, yeah.
Because they'll be like, "Why have you done this?" So that's fine. So look, with that in mind, I'm 10 for 10 on rejections, which is my Hinge hit rate. 10 out of 10 rejections.
Winning.
I know, it's great. So, look, Stu, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and go through everything. What would be good to know is, what would you like to leave the viewers of this conversation with today? What is something they can take away from everything we've discussed?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's, understand yourself. Get some understanding of who you are today. Irrespective of the journey you're on, understand who you are. If you can actually, quantify that, you're in a strong place. First and foremost, get your direction, and then move with some purpose and bloody do some actions. Because the key thing here is to really, this stuff isn't that complicated. It becomes challenging when you need to kind of add some substance to it, and you want to get to those goals quickly, because most people want the outcome. They've got to do some work to get there. So that's you have to work together. And I think if whatever you want to go and achieve, then work with those few things, and you'll get there quicker. Find the experts, talk to people, share.
Cool. All right, easy. And final thing, man, what would you like to plug? What would you like to, how can people work with Agency 8 in the future?
Yeah, look, so if people want to talk to me, connect with me, they can, by all means, via LinkedIn. That's the best method. I'm there every single day. So yeah, please come through that channel. It'll be clear. There's lots of information on there, but if you want to talk to me one-on-one and you want to go through this process, more than happy to do that. It's very simple.
Awesome. So look, Stu's details will either be there or there, depending on the platform that we're on, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you want to know more about Agency 8, also the details will be there. If you want to know more about, the nature of some of the things we've discussed today, you can also go through some of our old ThisIsBS or some of the other items. So, Stu, fantastic to have you on, mate. I really appreciate it. And I hope that the rest of your day in New Zealand is filled with happiness without a photo of me. So,
yeah, well, it's certainly, that's great. Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Cheers, mate.